Question 1. Quality control measures reveal that a driving examiner in Taranaki is consistently passing applicants who demonstrate a generally confident demeanor and execute most maneuvers correctly, but occasionally exhibit minor lapses in hazard perception. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to take to ensure compliance with the land transport rule, driver licensing, and uphold public safety? Option A. Ask the applicant if they seem generally competent and have completed the majority of the tests successfully, overlooking minor mistakes in hazard perception to avoid delaying their licensing. Option B. Conduct a more rigorous assessment, meticulously documenting all instances of hazard perception and adherence to road rules, and only pass applicants who consistently demonstrate safe driving behavior and adequate hazard awareness across all assessed criteria. Option C. Fail the applicant immediately upon observing any minor lapse in hazard perception, regardless of their overall performance, to err on the side of caution and strictly adhere to a zero-tolerance policy for any perceived risk. Option D. Continue passing applicants who appear confident and perform most maneuvers well, focusing on overall impression rather than minor errors in hazard perception, to maintain efficient service delivery. The correct answer is B. Conduct a more rigorous assessment, meticulously documenting all instances of hazard perception and adherence to road rules, and only pass applicants who consistently demonstrate safe driving behavior and adequate hazard awareness across all assessed criteria. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient service delivery with the paramount importance of ensuring driver competency and public safety on Taranaki roads. A hasty decision could compromise safety standards, while an overly cautious approach might unfairly delay a deserving applicant. The examiner must navigate these competing demands while adhering strictly to the land transport rule. Driver licensing. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective assessment of the applicant's performance against all criteria outlined in the land transport rule. Driver licensing, specifically focusing on the practical driving skills and hazard perception relevant to Taranaki's diverse road conditions. This includes observing the applicant's ability to safely navigate intersections, manage speed appropriately for varying road types, urban, rural, and potentially coastal roads common in Taranaki, demonstrate correct lane discipline, and respond effectively to traffic signals and other road users. The examiner must document all observations, both positive and negative, to justify the final decision, ensuring it aligns with the established competency standards for a Class 1 driver's license in New Zealand. This systematic and evidence-based approach upholds the integrity of the licensing process and prioritizes public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to pass the applicant based on a general impression of confidence and a few successful maneuvers, overlooking minor but potentially significant errors in hazard perception or adherence to road rules. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement of demonstrating consistent safe driving behavior and adequate hazard awareness, thereby compromising public safety. Another incorrect approach would be to fail the applicant solely because they appeared nervous or made a single, minor mistake, without considering the overall context of their driving performance and whether the error demonstrated a fundamental lack of competency or a momentary lapse. This approach is not aligned with the principle of assessing overall driving ability and could unfairly penalize an otherwise capable driver. A further incorrect approach would be to pass the applicant because the examiner felt pressured by time constraints or the applicant's perceived urgency. This prioritizes expediency over safety and regulatory compliance, undermining the purpose of the driving test as a gatekeeper for safe road use. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory requirements, land transport rule, driver licensing. They must then objectively observe and document the applicant's performance against each criterion. Any deviation from safe driving practices or failure to demonstrate adequate hazard perception should be carefully considered in the context of the overall assessment. The decision to pass or fail must be supported by specific, observable evidence, ensuring that the licensing process remains fair, consistent, and most importantly, prioritizes the safety of all road users in Taranaki. Question 2. The control framework reveals that the Taranaki Drivers Testing Center is experiencing significant delays in processing new driver license applications. Considering the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Driving Instruction and Driver Licensing 2023, which approach to optimizing the testing process would best balance efficiency with the absolute priority of ensuring driver competency and road safety. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current testing procedures, gather feedback from testing officers and applicants, and explore the integration of technology for administrative tasks while maintaining the integrity of practical assessments. Option B. Implement a new online booking system without providing comprehensive training to testing staff or ensuring its compatibility with existing record-keeping systems. Option C. Reduce the duration of the practical driving assessment for all license classes to expedite the testing schedule. Option D. Prioritize reducing applicant waiting times above all else, even if it means slightly compromising the depth of the practical driving assessment. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current testing procedures, gather feedback from testing officers and applicants, and explore the integration of technology for administrative tasks while maintaining the integrity of practical assessments. Explanation: the control framework reveals the importance of efficient and effective processes in managing driver testing operations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for timely testing with the absolute priority of ensuring all candidates meet the stringent safety and competency standards mandated by the New Zealand Land Transport Rule. Driving Instruction and Driver Licensing 2023. A poorly optimized process could lead to delays, frustrating applicants, and potentially impacting their ability to drive legally, or conversely. It could compromise the thoroughness of the assessment, leading to unqualified drivers on Taranaki roads. Careful judgment is required to implement improvement without sacrificing the integrity of the testing process. The best approach involves a systematic review of the current testing procedures, identifying bottlenecks and areas for improvement through data analysis and feedback from testing officers and recent applicants. This includes exploring technology to streamline administrative tasks, such as online booking systems and digital record keeping, while ensuring that the core practical assessment remains robust and uncompromised. This approach is correct because it directly addresses process optimization by seeking evidence-based improvements that enhance efficiency without diminishing the quality or safety outcomes required by the Land Transport Rule. It aligns with the ethical obligation to provide a fair and accurate assessment process and the regulatory requirement to ensure all licensed drivers demonstrate the necessary competence and understanding of road rules. An approach that focuses solely on reducing testing times by shortening the duration of the practical assessment is professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to a failure to adequately assess all required competencies, potentially violating the Land Transport Rule's emphasis on thorough evaluation and increasing the risk of unqualified drivers being licensed. Another unacceptable approach is to implement new technologies without adequate training for testing officers or proper integration with existing systems. This could lead to errors, delays, and a breakdown in the process, undermining the goal of optimization and potentially compromising data integrity, which is crucial for regulatory compliance. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes applicant convenience over safety and competency standards is ethically and regulatorily flawed. While applicant experience is important, it must never supersede the primary objective of ensuring road safety as mandated by the Land Transport Rule. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of process optimization, which in this context are to improve efficiency and effectiveness while upholding safety and competency standards. This should be followed by a thorough analysis of the current state, identifying specific pain points and opportunities. Solutions should then be developed, evaluated for their impact on all objectives, and piloted before full implementation. Continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance with the New Zealand Land Transport Rule. Driving Instruction and Driver Licensing 2023. Question 3. Process analysis reveals a need to optimize driver testing procedures in Taranaki to improve efficiency. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory requirements and ethical obligations for driver licensing in New Zealand? Option A. Introduce new, unvalidated testing equipment and software to expedite the testing process, assuming it offers a modern appearance. Option B. Implement measures to significantly reduce the average test duration for all license classes without altering the existing assessment criteria or examiner training. Option C. Prioritize processing volume by allowing examiners to deviate from standardized assessment checklists when they feel a candidate is competent. Option D. Systematically review and refine testing protocols, examiner training, and assessment criteria based on data and feedback to enhance the accuracy and effectiveness of driver competency evaluation. The correct answer is D. Systematically review and refine testing protocols, examiner training, and assessment criteria based on data and feedback to enhance the accuracy and effectiveness of driver competency evaluation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency in driver testing with the absolute necessity of ensuring all candidates meet the safety standards mandated by the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Driving Instruction and Driver Licensing 2023. The pressure to process a high volume of applicants can create a temptation to cut corners, which directly conflicts with the ethical and legal obligation to uphold public safety on Taranaki roads. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement process improvements that enhance efficiency without compromising the integrity or rigor of the testing process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves systematically reviewing the existing driver testing process to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement that directly enhance safety compliance and candidate assessment accuracy. This approach prioritizes data-driven insights and feedback from examiners to refine procedures, such as standardizing assessment criteria, improving examiner training on specific hazard perception scenarios relevant to Taranaki's diverse road conditions, e.g., rural roads, specific intersections, and ensuring technology used for testing is up to date and accurately reflects real-world driving challenges. This aligns with the Land Transport Rule's objective of ensuring drivers are competent and safe by focusing on the quality and effectiveness of the assessment itself. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely focusing on reducing the time taken per test without a corresponding review of the assessment criteria's effectiveness or the examiner's training. This risks a superficial improvement that could lead to less competent drivers being licensed, thereby failing to meet the safety objectives of the Land Transport Rule and potentially increasing road accidents in Taranaki. Another incorrect approach is to implement new testing technologies without adequate validation or examiner training. This could lead to inconsistent assessment, unfair outcomes for candidates, and a failure to accurately gauge driving competency, contravening the principle of a fair and reliable licensing process. A further incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal feedback from a small group of examiners without a structured process for data collection and analysis. This can lead to biased improvements that do not address systemic issues or may overlook critical safety aspects, undermining the systematic approach required by regulatory frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a continuous improvement mindset, guided by regulatory objectives and data. This involves establishing clear performance metrics for the testing process, regularly soliciting feedback from examiners and candidates, and using this information to implement targeted, evidence-based improvements. The primary goal must always be to enhance the safety and competence of licensed drivers. In accordance with the Land Transport Rule, Driving Instruction and Driver Licensing 2023, rather than simply optimizing for speed or cost. Question 4. The assessment process reveals that Mr. Henderson, a learner driver in Taranaki, is proficient in most driving skills, but experiences significant anxiety regarding parallel parking, a key component of the Taranaki driver licensing requirements. Considering the need to optimize preparation for his upcoming test while adhering to the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, Vehicle Registration and Licensing, 2017. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Advise Mr. Henderson to focus on other test components and hope he performs adequately on the parallel parking section during the actual test. Option B. Allocate minimal practice time to parallel parking to ensure sufficient time is spent on other, less challenging aspects of the driving test. Option C. Suggest that Mr. Henderson simply try harder and ignore his anxiety, as it is a common issue for many drivers. Option D. Implement a focused training module specifically designed to build confidence and proficiency in parallel parking, breaking down the maneuver and gradually increasing complexity. The correct answer is D. Implement a focused training module specifically designed to build confidence and proficiency in parallel parking, breaking down the maneuver and gradually increasing complexity. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in driver training, balancing efficiency with thoroughness. A learner driver, Mr. Henderson, has consistently demonstrated proficiency in basic maneuvers during practice sessions in Taranaki. However, he expresses significant anxiety about parallel parking, a critical component of the Taranaki driver licensing requirements. The instructor must decide how to best prepare Mr. Henderson for his upcoming test, considering both the time constraints of the training program and the need to ensure he meets all licensing standards. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the instructor to make a judgment call on the optimal allocation of training resources, balancing the learner's specific anxieties with the objective requirements of the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, Vehicle Registration and Licensing, 2017, and the NZTA Driver Licensing Guide. The instructor must ensure Mr. Henderson is not only competent, but also confident enough to perform all required maneuvers safely and effectively under test conditions, without compromising the integrity of the licensing process. The best approach involves a targeted intervention focused on Mr. Henderson's specific area of weakness. This means dedicating additional practice time specifically to parallel parking, using techniques designed to build confidence and skill in this maneuver. This could include breaking down the maneuver into smaller steps, using visual aids, and gradually increasing the difficulty of the parking scenarios. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the identified deficit, ensuring compliance with the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, Vehicle Registration and Licensing, 2017, which mandates competency in all required driving skills for licensing. It also aligns with the ethical obligation of an instructor to prepare a learner driver thoroughly and responsibly, fostering safe driving practices rather than simply aiming for a pass. This targeted method optimizes the learning process by focusing effort where it is most needed, leading to a more robust and confident driver. An approach that prioritizes moving on to other test components without adequately addressing the parallel parking anxiety would be professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for demonstrated competency in all aspects of the driving test and ethically compromises the instructor's duty of care. Another unacceptable approach would be to simply tell Mr. Henderson to try harder or don't worry about it. This dismisses the learner's genuine anxiety, which can significantly impair performance, and does not provide any constructive support or strategy for improvement, thus failing to meet the standards expected of a professional driving instructor. Furthermore, an approach that involves rushing through the parallel parking practice to save time for other less challenging maneuvers would also be inappropriate. This prioritizes speed over competence, potentially leading to a driver who can pass the test but is not truly safe or proficient in all necessary skills, contravening the spirit and letter of the licensing regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the learner's strengths and weaknesses. This should be followed by a diagnostic evaluation of the root cause of any difficulties, such as anxiety. Based on this assessment, a tailored training plan should be developed that prioritizes areas requiring improvement, using evidence-based teaching techniques. Regular feedback and encouragement are crucial throughout the process, and the plan should be flexible enough to adapt to the learner's progress. The ultimate goal is to ensure the learner is not only test-ready, but also a safe and competent driver for the long term. Question 5. The assessment process reveals that a candidate presenting for their Class 1 driver's license test in Taranaki is exhibiting significant signs of distress, including trembling hands, shallow breathing, and difficulty maintaining eye contact, which appear to be impacting their ability to focus on the pre-drive vehicle safety questions. What is the most appropriate course of action for the testing officer to take? Option A. Conduct the test but make a note of the candidate's anxiety, assuming it will not significantly affect their driving performance. Option B. Proceed with the test as scheduled, advising the candidate to just try their best despite their visible anxiety. Option C. Offer to postpone the test to a later date, explaining that the candidate may perform better when feeling more relaxed. Option D. Immediately fail the candidate for demonstrating an inability to focus and communicate effectively during the pre-drive checks. The correct answer is C. Offer to postpone the test to a later date, explaining that the candidate may perform better when feeling more relaxed. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in driver training, balancing efficiency with thoroughness. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the instructor to make a judgment call on whether to proceed with a test when a candidate exhibits signs of significant anxiety, which could impair their ability to drive safely and demonstrate their competence according to the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, Setting and Keeping a Safe Speed 2004, and the NZ Transport Agency's NZTA driver testing procedures. The instructor must consider the candidate's well-being, the integrity of the testing process, and the safety of the public. The best approach involves prioritizing the candidate's immediate safety and the validity of the assessment. This means recognizing that extreme anxiety can be a temporary impairment, similar to physical illness, that prevents a fair evaluation of driving skills. By offering a postponement, the instructor upholds the ethical responsibility to ensure tests are conducted under conditions where the candidate can perform to the best of their ability and safely. This aligns with the NZTA emphasis on assessing a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently, which is compromised when a candidate is severely distressed. It also respects the candidate's right to a fair assessment. Proceeding with the test when a candidate is visibly overwhelmed is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to acknowledge that severe anxiety can lead to unpredictable driving behavior, potentially creating a hazard on the road. It prioritizes the completion of the test over the safety of the candidate and other road users, violating the instructor's duty of care. Furthermore, it compromises the integrity of the testing process, as the results would not accurately reflect the candidate's actual driving capabilities under normal circumstances. Another unacceptable approach is to immediately fail the candidate without offering any recourse. While the instructor has a responsibility to assess competence, a complete failure to consider the impact of temporary impairment like extreme anxiety is overly punitive and does not align with the spirit of driver assessment, which aims to develop safe drivers. It overlooks the possibility that the anxiety is situational and could be managed with a brief delay. Finally, suggesting the candidate just try their best without addressing the visible distress is dismissive of the candidate's condition. This approach fails to recognize the potential impact of anxiety on driving performance and places undue pressure on the candidate, potentially exacerbating their anxiety and leading to unsafe driving. It neglects the professional responsibility to ensure the candidate is in a suitable state to be tested. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with observation and assessment of the candidate's state. If signs of significant impairment, like extreme anxiety, are present, the next step is to communicate concerns empathetically and offer alternatives, such as postponing the test. This framework emphasizes safety, fairness, and ethical conduct, ensuring that assessments are valid and contribute to road safety in New Zealand. Question 6. System analysis indicates a driver licensing applicant in Taranaki has provided a utility bill that appears to be from a friend's address, and they are unable to produce any other standard proof of address from the approved list. Considering the process optimization goals of the Taranaki driver's test, which of the following actions best balances efficiency with regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with issuing the driver's license. Noting the discrepancy in the file, as the applicant has been a resident of Taranaki for the required period according to their verbal assurance. Option B. Accept a handwritten note from a neighbor confirming the applicant's residency as a substitute for the required official proof of address. Option C. Politely inform the applicant that the provided proof of address is not acceptable according to the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, and request they provide a valid document from the approved list, or explain the process for obtaining alternative acceptable documentation if applicable. Option D. Issue the driver's license as the applicant has provided a utility bill, assuming it is sufficient proof of their connection to an address in Taranaki. The correct answer is C. Politely inform the applicant that the provided proof of address is not acceptable according to the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, and request they provide a valid document from the approved list, or explain the process for obtaining alternative acceptable documentation if applicable. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient service delivery with the fundamental obligation to ensure all drivers meet the required safety standards for operating a vehicle on New Zealand roads. The pressure to process applications quickly can create a temptation to overlook minor discrepancies, but doing so compromises public safety and the integrity of the licensing system. Careful judgment is required to identify when a deviation from standard procedure is necessary and justified, versus when it constitutes a breach of regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously verifying all documentation and ensuring the applicant meets all the criteria stipulated by the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. This includes confirming the applicant's identity, residency status, and that they have successfully completed the required training and assessments. If any documentation appears questionable or incomplete, the correct approach is to request clarification or additional evidence from the applicant, or to consult with a supervisor or the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, if necessary, rather than proceeding with an incomplete or potentially fraudulent application. This aligns with the NZTA mandate to ensure road safety and prevent unqualified individuals from obtaining driver's licenses, upholding the principles of the Land Transport Act 1998 and its associated rules. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the application despite the applicant's inability to provide a valid proof of address from the approved list is a regulatory failure. The Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 2017 specifies acceptable forms of evidence for residency, and accepting an unverified utility bill from a friend is not compliant. This could lead to a license being issued to someone who does not genuinely reside in New Zealand, potentially circumventing other legal requirements or safety checks. Issuing the license based solely on the applicant's assurance that they have lived in Taranaki for the required period, without the necessary documentary evidence, is also a significant breach. This bypasses the established verification processes designed to ensure accuracy and prevent fraud, directly contravening the spirit and letter of the licensing regulations. It prioritizes expediency over due diligence, creating a risk to public safety. Accepting a handwritten note from a neighbor as proof of address is similarly non-compliant. The regulations require specific, verifiable forms of documentation. Relying on informal, unverified statements undermines the integrity of the licensing system and opens the door to potential misrepresentation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should adopt a systematic approach to application processing. This involves a thorough review of all submitted documents against the established criteria outlined in the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. When discrepancies or missing information are identified, the professional should follow established protocols for seeking clarification or additional evidence. This might involve politely informing the applicant of the specific requirements they have not met and providing them with an opportunity to rectify the situation. If there is any doubt about the validity of the documentation or the applicant's eligibility, escalating the matter to a supervisor or the NZTA for guidance is the responsible course of action. This ensures that decisions are made based on regulatory compliance and a commitment to road safety. Question 7. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a Class 1 driver's license in Taranaki is exhibiting extreme nervousness, including trembling hands and difficulty concentrating, during the initial stages of their practical driving test. What is the most appropriate course of action for the testing officer? Option A. Postpone the test and advise the candidate to reschedule when they feel more prepared. Option B. Offer a brief relaxation exercise and then continue with the test as scheduled. Option C. Proceed with the test, encouraging the candidate to just try their best despite their visible distress. Option D. Continue with the test but focus solely on the technical execution of maneuvers, overlooking the candidate's anxiety. The correct answer is A. Postpone the test and advise the candidate to reschedule when they feel more prepared. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in driver training, balancing efficiency with thoroughness. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the instructor to make a judgment call on whether to proceed with a test when a candidate exhibits signs of significant anxiety. Rushing the process could lead to an unsafe outcome on the road, while delaying unnecessarily might demotivate the candidate or create further stress. Careful judgment is required to prioritize public safety and the candidate's well-being. The best approach involves prioritizing safety and the candidate's readiness over strict adherence to a predetermined schedule. This means recognizing that a candidate's extreme anxiety can impair their ability to drive safely, even if they have technically mastered the maneuvers. The instructor should assess the level of anxiety and its potential impact on driving performance. If the anxiety is severe enough to compromise safety, the responsible action is to postpone the test. This aligns with the fundamental ethical obligation of driving instructors and examiners to ensure that only competent and safe drivers are licensed. The Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 1999 in New Zealand, specifically Part 3 concerning the conduct of driving tests, implicitly requires examiners to exercise professional judgment to ensure the safety of the applicant and the public. While the rules outline the testing procedure, they do not mandate proceeding if a candidate's condition renders them demonstrably unsafe. Proceeding with the test when a candidate is visibly overwhelmed by anxiety is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards the potential for impaired judgment and reaction times, directly contravening the safety mandate of the testing process. Prioritizes the completion of the test over the assessment of actual safe driving capability. Offering a brief relaxation exercise and then proceeding with the test, despite the candidate's continued visible distress, is also professionally unacceptable. While well-intentioned, it fails to adequately address the root cause of the impaired performance and does not guarantee that the anxiety has subsided to a level where safe driving can be assured. The risk of a driving error due to anxiety remains high, suggesting the candidate just try their best, and continuing the test without a more thorough assessment of their anxiety's impact is unprofessional. This dismisses the candidate's distress and places undue pressure on them, potentially exacerbating their anxiety and leading to a higher likelihood of errors. It fails to uphold the professional responsibility to ensure a candidate is truly ready and capable of safe driving. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear assessment of risk. This includes 1. Identifying the observable signs of distress or impairment. 2. Evaluating the potential impact of these signs on safe driving performance, considering the specific maneuvers required. 3. Consulting relevant guidelines or rules regarding candidate suitability for testing. 4. Making a judgment call that prioritizes safety and ethical obligations, even if it means deviating from a standard procedure. In cases of significant doubt about a candidate's ability to drive safely due to anxiety, postponement is the most responsible course of action. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a driving instructor in Taranaki, New Zealand, is seeking to optimize their training program for learner drivers. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical obligations for driver licensing in New Zealand, which approach best balances efficiency with the paramount goal of producing safe and competent drivers. Option A. Designing a program that prioritizes covering all potential practical test routes within the shortest possible time frame, assuming that familiarity with routes equates to overall driving competence. Option B. Implementing a structured curriculum that progresses through foundational skills to complex scenarios, with continuous assessment and tailored practice based on the learner's individual progress and mastery of competencies, ensuring sufficient time is allocated for diverse Taranaki road conditions. Option C. Focusing on a high volume of clients by accelerating the pace of instruction, potentially reducing practice time on specific challenging maneuvers or Taranaki road conditions to fit more learners through the program. Option D. Adopting a rapid-fire teaching method that introduces a wide range of complex driving skills in quick succession, with minimal time for consolidation or individual practice, to maximize the number of topics covered. The correct answer is B. Implementing a structured curriculum that progresses through foundational skills to complex scenarios, with continuous assessment and tailored practice based on the learner's individual progress and mastery of competencies, ensuring sufficient time is allocated for diverse Taranaki road conditions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Taranaki, New Zealand, who is responsible for preparing learners for their practical driving test. The challenge lies in balancing the need to optimize the learning process for efficiency with the paramount ethical and regulatory obligation to ensure the learner is genuinely safe and competent to drive independently on Taranaki's diverse road conditions, which can include rural roads, urban areas, and potentially challenging weather. Rushing the process for the sake of optimization risks compromising road safety and failing to meet the standards set by the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a structured, progressive approach to skill development, ensuring each competency is mastered before moving to more complex scenarios. This means dedicating sufficient time to foundational skills like hazard perception, vehicle control, and adherence to road rules in various Taranaki environments. The instructor must continually assess the learner's progress, providing targeted feedback and additional practice where needed, rather than adhering to a rigid, predetermined timeline. This aligns with the NZTA objective of producing safe and competent drivers, as outlined in the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 1999, which emphasizes the need for drivers to demonstrate a thorough understanding and application of safe driving practices. Ethical considerations also dictate that the instructor prioritizes the learner's safety and the safety of other road users above all else. Incorrect approaches analysis, focusing solely on covering all test routes within a set time frame, regardless of the learner's actual skill acquisition, is an unacceptable approach. It prioritizes test success over genuine competency and safety, potentially leading to a driver who can navigate specific routes, but lacks the underlying skills to adapt to unforeseen situations, violating the spirit and intent of the NZTA licensing requirements. Prioritizing speed of instruction to maximize client throughput, even if it means skipping practice on certain challenging Taranaki road conditions or maneuvers, is also professionally unsound. This approach neglects the diverse driving environments learners will encounter and fails to adequately prepare them for all potential hazards, contravening the NZTA mandate for comprehensive driver training. Adopting a cramming approach where complex skills are introduced rapidly without sufficient consolidation and practice is detrimental. This can overwhelm the learner, leading to superficial understanding and poor retention of critical safety procedures, which is ethically irresponsible and does not meet the standards for safe driving in New Zealand. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a learner-centric approach, continuously assessing and adapting their teaching methods to the individual's needs and progress. This involves setting realistic learning objectives, providing consistent and constructive feedback, and ensuring all essential competencies are thoroughly practiced and understood before advancing. The ultimate goal is to produce a safe, responsible, and competent driver, not merely someone who can pass a test. This requires a deep understanding of the NZTA licensing standards and a commitment to ethical instruction that prioritizes public safety. Question 9. Strategic planning requires Taranaki driving instructors to optimize their teaching methods to improve student success rates on the Taranaki driver's test. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical obligations in New Zealand, which of the following approaches represents the most effective strategy for achieving this goal? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of student performance data from the Taranaki driver's test, alongside student feedback, to identify specific areas of weakness and subsequently refine lesson plans and practice exercises to target these deficiencies. Option B. Increase the number of driving lessons offered to each student, regardless of their current skill level, to maximize their exposure to driving situations. Option C. Focus exclusively on teaching the exact maneuvers and scenarios that are known to appear on the Taranaki driver's test, ensuring students are drilled on test-specific requirements. Option D. Rely on the instructor's personal experience and intuition to make adjustments to teaching methods, without systematically collecting or analyzing student performance data. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of student performance data from the Taranaki driver's test, alongside student feedback, to identify specific areas of weakness and subsequently refine lesson plans and practice exercises to target these deficiencies. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for a driving instructor in Taranaki, New Zealand, who is tasked with optimizing their teaching process to improve student pass rates for the Taranaki driver's test. The challenge lies in balancing efficiency with the thoroughness required to ensure new drivers are safe and competent on Taranaki's diverse road conditions, which can include rural roads, urban areas, and potentially challenging weather. A key ethical and regulatory consideration is the instructor's duty of care to their students and the public, ensuring that only those who meet the required standard of proficiency are recommended for testing. The best approach involves a systematic review of current teaching methods, student feedback, and pass/fail data from the Taranaki driver's test. This data-driven analysis allows for the identification of specific areas where students consistently struggle, such as navigating roundabouts common in New Plymouth or understanding rural road etiquette. By pinpointing these weaknesses, the instructor can then refine lesson plans, introduce targeted practice exercises, and provide more focused feedback. This aligns with the Land Transport Rule, Driver Licensing 2017, which emphasizes the need for comprehensive driver training that prepares individuals for all aspects of driving. The ethical imperative is to ensure students are not just prepared to pass a test, but to drive safely and responsibly throughout Taranaki. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the volume of lessons without addressing specific learning gaps is problematic. This could lead to students spending more time on the road without necessarily improving their skills in critical areas, potentially leading to a higher risk of failure or, more importantly, accidents. This fails to meet the spirit of the licensing requirements, which are designed to ensure competence. Another ineffective approach would be to prioritize teaching only the maneuvers explicitly tested in the Taranaki driver's test, neglecting broader defensive driving skills or hazard perception. While passing the test is important, the ultimate goal of driver education is to produce safe drivers. Overemphasizing test-specific skills at the expense of real-world driving preparedness is ethically questionable and could lead to drivers who are technically proficient in a controlled test environment, but unprepared for unexpected situations on Taranaki's roads. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal intuition rather than objective data analysis is also flawed. While experience is valuable, it should be complemented by concrete evidence to identify systemic issues and implement effective improvements. Without a data-driven foundation, any changes made might be misdirected, wasting valuable time and resources, and failing to achieve the desired improvement in student outcomes for the Taranaki driver's test. Professionals should adopt a continuous improvement mindset, regularly evaluating their teaching methods against student performance data and regulatory requirements. This involves seeking feedback, analyzing results, and making evidence-based adjustments to their curriculum and delivery. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a driver in Taranaki needs to be able to stop their vehicle safely. If the driver is traveling at 80 km/h on a dry asphalt road with a coefficient of friction //mu/ of 0.7 and assuming a reaction time of 1.5 seconds, what is the minimum safe stopping distance in meters, rounded to 1 decimal place? Use /g equals 9.8 /m/s2 option A. The minimum safe stopping distance is approximately 75.5 meters, option B. The minimum safe stopping distance is approximately 26.2 meters, option C. The minimum safe stopping distance is approximately 49.7 meters, option D. The minimum safe stopping distance is approximately 90.0 meters. The correct answer is A. The minimum safe stopping distance is approximately 75.5 meters. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in the Taranaki region, accurately calculating the required stopping distance for a vehicle under varying conditions, which directly impacts road safety and compliance with New Zealand's Land Transport Road User Rule 2004. Professionals must demonstrate a thorough understanding of the physics involved and the legal requirements to ensure safe driving practices. The correct approach involves applying the fundamental principles of physics to calculate stopping distance, considering both reaction time and braking distance, and ensuring the result aligns with the minimum safety margin stipulated or implied by road safety regulations in New Zealand. Specifically, this requires understanding that total stopping distance is the sum of perception time, reaction time, and braking distance. The calculation must account for factors like speed, road surface condition, friction coefficient, and vehicle braking efficiency. For instance, a common formula for braking distance is /d equals /frac v22 /mu g /, where /v/ is velocity, /mu/ is the coefficient of friction, and /g/ is acceleration due to gravity. Reaction distance is typically calculated as d reaction equals v/ times t reaction /, where t reaction / is the reaction time. The total stopping distance is then d total equals d reaction plus d braking /. This method is correct because it directly addresses the physical realities of stopping a vehicle and ensures that the driver has adequate space to stop safely, thereby adhering to the overarching goal of road safety legislation in New Zealand, which prioritizes preventing accidents and protecting lives. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on a fixed, arbitrary distance without considering the speed of the vehicle. This fails to acknowledge the nonlinear relationship between speed and braking distance, where doubling the speed quadruples the braking distance. This oversight is a direct contravention of safe driving principles and the spirit of road safety regulations, which are designed to adapt to dynamic driving conditions. Another incorrect approach would be to only calculate the braking distance and neglect the reaction distance. This is fundamentally flawed, as it ignores the time it takes for a driver to perceive a hazard and initiate braking. This omission leads to an underestimation of the total stopping distance, creating a significant safety risk, and failing to meet the comprehensive safety requirements of road user rules. A further incorrect approach might involve using an outdated or simplified formula that does not accurately reflect modern vehicle capabilities or road conditions. While simplification can be tempting, it compromises the accuracy of the calculation and therefore the safety margin. Professional decision-making in this context requires a systematic process. First, identify the relevant variables: speed, road conditions, driver reaction time. Second, select the appropriate physical formulas to calculate reaction distance and braking distance. Third, sum these distances to determine the total stopping distance. And finally, compare this calculated distance against safe driving margins and any specific regulatory requirements for stopping distances in New Zealand. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that during a practical driving assessment in Taranaki, a candidate unexpectedly takes a wrong turn onto a private driveway, briefly stopping before realizing their error and reversing back onto the public road. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to ensure a fair and accurate assessment of the candidate's driving competency? Option A. Ignore the incident as a minor error and continue the test without any specific observation or documentation of the event. Option B. Observe the candidate's reaction and subsequent actions without intervention, documenting their ability to identify and correct the error, and then continue the assessment. Option C. Immediately provide verbal guidance to the candidate on how to correct their mistake and return to the correct route. Option D. Terminate the driving test immediately due to the candidate deviating from the planned route. The correct answer is B. Observe the candidate's reaction and subsequent actions without intervention, documenting their ability to identify and correct the error, and then continue the assessment. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that ensuring driver competency and road safety is paramount in Taranaki. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the Taranaki Land Transport Rule 1999 and any subsequent amendments or related land transport, driver licensing, Rule 2017, concerning the assessment of a candidate's ability to operate a vehicle safely and competently, particularly when faced with a situation that deviates from standard testing conditions. The examiner must balance the need to adhere to the testing protocol with the responsibility to accurately assess the candidate's true driving capability in a potentially stressful or unusual circumstance. The best approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the candidate's reaction and subsequent actions, documenting all observations meticulously. This aligns with the Land Transport Rule's emphasis on assessing a driver's ability to respond appropriately to unexpected events and to demonstrate a consistent standard of safe driving. The examiner's role is to observe and record, not to intervene unless immediate danger necessitates it. By allowing the candidate to navigate the situation independently and then evaluating their performance, the examiner gathers authentic data on their decision-making and vehicle control under pressure, which is crucial for determining their readiness for a driver's license. This method ensures the assessment is a true reflection of the candidate's skills as required by the licensing authority. An incorrect approach would be to immediately offer verbal guidance or assistance. This compromises the integrity of the test by altering the candidate's natural response and decision-making process. The test is designed to evaluate the candidate's independent judgment and skills, not their ability to follow instructions during the test itself. Providing unsolicited help undermines the assessment's validity and could lead to a license being issued to someone who might not be truly prepared for unexpected road events. Another incorrect approach is to terminate the test prematurely due to the minor deviation from the expected route, without first observing how the candidate handles the situation. This fails to assess the candidate's problem-solving abilities and adaptability, which are critical components of safe driving. The test aims to evaluate a broad range of driving competencies, including the ability to recover from minor errors or unexpected circumstances. Abruptly ending the test without this observation is an incomplete assessment. Finally, An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the candidate's reaction as insignificant and proceed with the test as if nothing happened, without any documentation or consideration of the event. This neglects a potentially important indicator of the candidate's awareness and reaction to their environment. Even minor deviations can reveal underlying issues with observation, judgment, or vehicle control that are relevant to overall road safety and licensing standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective observation and adherence to the spirit of the regulations. This involves understanding the core objectives of the assessment: road safety and competency, remaining calm and objective in unexpected situations, documenting all relevant observations, and making a judgment based on the totality of the candidate's performance against the established criteria. If an event occurs that deviates from the expected, the professional must assess its impact on the candidate's demonstrated ability to drive safely and competently, rather than reacting emotionally or deviating from the assessment's purpose. Question 12. Analysis of a stalled vehicle during a Taranaki driver's license test on a moderately busy rural road presents a critical juncture. The examiner must ensure the safety of the applicant themselves and other road users, while also upholding the standards of the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, driving on roads. Considering these factors, what is the most appropriate immediate action for the examiner to take when the applicant's vehicle unexpectedly stops in a traffic lane? Option A. Instruct the applicant to immediately attempt to restart the vehicle and continue the test to avoid delaying other traffic. Option B. Immediately exit the vehicle and attempt to push it to the side of the road without first ensuring other traffic is aware of the maneuver. Option C. Advise the applicant to exit the vehicle and leave it in the traffic lane while the examiner seeks assistance from a passing motorist. Option D. Safely stop the vehicle, activate hazard lights, and then assess the situation to determine the safest course of action, which may include moving the vehicle if possible or seeking assistance. Correct answer is D. Safely stop the vehicle, activate hazard lights, and then assess the situation to determine the safest course of action, which may include moving the vehicle if possible or seeking assistance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient traffic flow with the paramount importance of driver safety and adherence to the specific regulations of Taranaki. The pressure to clear the road quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the testing process or the safety of other road users. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are compliant with the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, driving on roads, and are ethically sound. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the immediate safety of all road users and the integrity of the testing process. This means ensuring that any obstruction is managed in a way that minimizes risk and does not compromise the driver's ability to demonstrate their skills safely. Specifically, this approach involves safely stopping the vehicle, activating hazard lights to warn other road users, and then assessing the situation to determine the safest course of action, which may include moving the vehicle to a safe location if possible, or seeking assistance if the vehicle is in a dangerous position. This aligns with the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, driving on roads, which emphasizes safe driving practices and the responsibility to avoid causing danger to others. The ethical imperative is to uphold public safety and the credibility of the driver testing system. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately attempting to restart the vehicle and continue the test without adequately assessing the situation or warning other road users. This fails to meet the safety requirements of the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, driving on roads, as it could create a hazard for other vehicles and does not demonstrate responsible driver behavior in an unexpected situation. It prioritizes the continuation of the test over immediate safety. Another incorrect approach is to abandon the vehicle in its current position and leave the testing area. This is a direct violation of the responsibilities outlined in the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, driving on roads, which requires drivers to take reasonable steps to ensure their vehicle does not cause a hazard. It also undermines the integrity of the testing process and demonstrates a lack of accountability. A further incorrect approach is to attempt to push the vehicle to the side of the road without first activating hazard lights or ensuring that other traffic is aware of the maneuver. This creates a significant risk of collision, as other drivers may not anticipate the sudden movement or the presence of individuals near a moving vehicle. This directly contravenes the fundamental safety principles of the Taranaki Land Transport Rule. Driving on roads. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with an immediate assessment of safety. This involves identifying potential hazards and taking immediate steps to mitigate them, such as activating warning signals. Following this, the professional should consider the regulatory requirements relevant to the situation. In this case, the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, driving on roads. The next step is to evaluate the available options for resolving the immediate problem, the stalled vehicle, in a manner that is both safe and compliant. Finally, the professional should document the incident and the actions taken, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 13. The review process indicates that the current Taranaki driver's test booking system is experiencing significant delays and inefficiencies. To address this, what is the most effective strategy for optimizing the booking process while ensuring fair access for all applicants in Taranaki? Option A. Introduce a lottery system for all test bookings to provide an equal chance of securing an appointment for every applicant. Option B. Significantly increase the number of available booking slots across all testing centers in Taranaki without further analysis of demand patterns. Option C. Implement a data-driven tiered booking system that prioritizes urgent cases and offers flexible appointment windows based on demand analysis. Option D. Randomly assign all available booking slots to applicants on a first-come, first-served basis to ensure absolute fairness. The correct answer is C. Implement a data-driven tiered booking system that prioritizes urgent cases and offers flexible appointment windows based on demand analysis. Explanation. The review process indicates a need to optimize the Taranaki driver's test booking system to improve efficiency and reduce wait times for applicants. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient resource allocation with the fundamental right of individuals to access essential services like obtaining a driver's license in Taranaki. A rushed or poorly designed optimization could inadvertently create barriers for certain groups or compromise the integrity of the testing process. The best approach involves a data-driven analysis of current booking patterns, peak demand periods, and applicant demographics within Taranaki. This would inform the development of a tiered booking system that allocates slots based on urgency, e.g., learners nearing expiry, individuals needing licenses for employment, and offers flexible appointment windows. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the identified inefficiencies by leveraging available data to create a more equitable and responsive system. It aligns with the principles of good governance and service delivery expected by the New Zealand Transport Agency, NZTA, guidelines for driver licensing, which emphasize accessibility and fairness. Furthermore, it proactively seeks to mitigate potential negative impacts by considering diverse applicant needs. An incorrect approach would be to simply increase the number of available booking slots without considering demand fluctuations or the capacity of testing facilities in Taranaki. This could lead to underutilized resources during off-peak times and continued congestion during peak periods, failing to achieve true optimization. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize bookings solely based on the earliest application date, ignoring factors like urgency or the need for specific license classes. This could disadvantage individuals who genuinely require their license sooner for critical reasons, potentially leading to frustration and non-compliance with licensing requirements. A third incorrect approach would be to implement a lottery system for all bookings. While seemingly random, this lacks any consideration for genuine need or urgency and could lead to significant delays for those who require their license promptly, undermining the purpose of the licensing process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and desired outcomes. This involves gathering relevant data, consulting with stakeholders, including testing staff and potentially applicant representative groups, and exploring various solutions. Each potential solution should be evaluated against criteria such as efficiency, fairness, accessibility, and compliance with NZTA regulations. Pilot testing and iterative refinement are crucial steps before full implementation to ensure the chosen optimization strategy effectively serves the Taranaki community. Question 14. Performance analysis shows that wait times for practical driving tests in Taranaki are increasing, impacting applicant satisfaction and examiner workload. Considering the need to maintain rigorous safety standards as mandated by the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017, what is the most effective and ethically sound approach to optimizing the driver testing process? Option A. Focus solely on streamlining administrative tasks related to booking and rescheduling tests, while leaving the practical assessment duration unchanged. Option B. Immediately shorten the duration of all practical driving tests to process more applicants within the same time frame. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the current testing procedures to identify specific inefficiencies and areas for improvement, followed by the development and piloting of targeted solutions that uphold assessment integrity. Option D. Introduce a new, unproven digital assessment tool for all practical driving tests without prior validation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the current testing procedures to identify specific inefficiencies and areas for improvement, followed by the development and piloting of targeted solutions that uphold assessment integrity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient service delivery with the fundamental obligation to ensure all drivers meet the required safety standards for operating a vehicle in Taranaki. A rushed or compromised assessment process, even with good intentions to reduce wait times, can have serious consequences for public safety and erode public trust in the licensing system. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement process improvements that enhance efficiency without sacrificing the integrity of the driver assessment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic review of the existing Taranaki driver testing process to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies. This includes gathering feedback from examiners and applicants, analyzing test completion times, and evaluating the effectiveness of current assessment criteria. Based on this data, targeted improvements can be developed and piloted, such as optimizing scheduling, refining assessment materials for clarity, or providing additional training to examiners on efficient yet thorough evaluation techniques. This approach is correct because it is data-driven, respects the established regulatory framework for driver licensing in Taranaki, and prioritizes maintaining high safety standards while seeking operational improvements. It aligns with the ethical duty to serve the public interest by ensuring only competent and safe drivers are licensed. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately reducing the duration of practical driving tests without a thorough analysis of the impact on assessment quality. This is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it risks compromising the ability of examiners to adequately assess a driver's competency and adherence to the New Zealand road user rules, potentially leading to unsafe drivers being licensed. Another incorrect approach is to implement new, untested assessment technologies or methodologies without proper validation and integration into the existing Taranaki licensing framework. This could lead to inconsistent or inaccurate assessments, violating the principle of fair and standardized evaluation required by the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Rule 2017. A further incorrect approach is to prioritize applicant satisfaction surveys over the objective assessment of driving skills and knowledge. While applicant experience is important, the primary regulatory purpose of the driver test is to ensure public safety, not solely to please applicants. Ignoring objective safety criteria in favor of subjective feedback would be a dereliction of professional duty and a breach of regulatory requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a continuous improvement mindset grounded in data and regulatory compliance. The decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the core regulatory objectives, public safety, competency assessment. 2. Gathering objective data on current performance. 3. Identifying specific areas for improvement through root cause analysis. 4. Developing and piloting solutions that are demonstrably effective and compliant. 5. Monitoring the impact of changes and iterating as necessary. This structured approach ensures that any process optimization serves both efficiency and the paramount goal of road safety in Taranaki. Question 15. Compliance review shows that the Taranaki driver testing process is experiencing significant delays, impacting applicant wait times. Considering the Taranaki Land Transport Authority, NZTA, regulations and the paramount importance of driver safety, which approach to optimizing the testing process is most professionally sound? Option A. Prioritize the speed of processing applications over the accuracy and completeness of the information collected to reduce administrative backlogs. Option B. Implement a blanket reduction in the time allocated for each testing component to expedite the overall process, irrespective of the component's complexity or safety criticality. Option C. Automate the assessment of all practical driving skills without human oversight to significantly speed up the evaluation phase. Option D. Systematically review existing Taranaki driver testing procedures to identify bottlenecks and propose targeted improvements that enhance process speed without compromising the assessment of essential driving skills and knowledge, ensuring alignment with NZTA standards. The correct answer is D. Systematically review existing Taranaki driver testing procedures to identify bottlenecks and propose targeted improvements that enhance process speed without compromising the assessment of essential driving skills and knowledge, ensuring alignment with NZTA standards. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient traffic flow with the paramount importance of driver safety and adherence to the specific regulations of Taranaki. The temptation to prioritize speed over thoroughness can lead to overlooking critical safety checks, potentially resulting in dangerous situations on the road. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the process optimization does not compromise the integrity of the licensing process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves systematically reviewing the existing Taranaki driver testing procedures to identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies, then proposing targeted improvements that enhance process speed without compromising the assessment of essential driving skills and knowledge. This approach prioritizes maintaining the high standards set by the Taranaki Land Transport Authority, NZTA, for driver competency. It ensures that any optimization efforts are aligned with the regulatory framework, which mandates that all drivers demonstrate a thorough understanding of road rules, safe driving practices, and vehicle control specific to New Zealand conditions. This method upholds the ethical obligation to ensure only competent and safe drivers are licensed, thereby protecting public safety on Taranaki's roads. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves implementing a blanket reduction in the time allocated for each testing component, regardless of its criticality. This fails to acknowledge that certain skills, such as hazard perception or complex maneuvering, require adequate time for proper assessment. This approach risks compromising the thoroughness of the evaluation, potentially leading to the licensing of drivers who have not been adequately tested on essential safety aspects, violating the spirit and letter of the NZTA licensing requirements. Another incorrect approach is to automate the assessment of practical driving skills without human oversight. While automation can increase efficiency, it may not be able to accurately gauge nuanced aspects of driver judgment, situational awareness, or the ability to adapt to unpredictable road conditions, all of which are crucial for safe driving in Taranaki. This bypasses the requirement for a comprehensive assessment of a driver's practical abilities as stipulated by the NZTA. A further incorrect approach is to prioritize the speed of processing applications over the accuracy of the information collected. This could involve accepting incomplete or unverified documentation, or rushing through the administrative aspects of the testing process. Such an approach directly contravenes the regulatory requirements for accurate record-keeping and verification, and could lead to administrative errors that undermine the integrity of the licensing system. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured approach to process optimization. This involves 1. Understanding the current process and its objectives, ensuring safe and competent drivers. 2. Identifying specific areas for improvement through data analysis and stakeholder feedback. 3. Proposing solutions that are evaluated against regulatory compliance and safety impact. 4. Piloting and monitoring any changes to ensure they achieve the desired efficiency gains without compromising quality or safety. The ultimate goal is to enhance the driver testing process in Taranaki in a manner that is both efficient and rigorously compliant with NZTA regulations and ethical standards. Question 16. Investigation of a vehicle exhibiting inconsistent lane positioning and sudden, minor speed fluctuations on State Highway 3 in Taranaki, New Zealand. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for an observer concerned about road safety? Option A. Attempt to signal the driver to pull over and inquire about their driving. Option B. Observe the vehicle's behavior for a short, reasonable period to identify a pattern of erratic driving before considering any further action. Option C. Immediately assume the driver is impaired or intentionally driving dangerously and report the vehicle to the authorities. Option D. Ignore the behavior, assuming it is a minor issue that does not warrant attention. The correct answer is B. Observe the vehicle's behavior for a short, reasonable period to identify a pattern of erratic driving before considering any further action. Explanation. Investigation of a driver's behavior on the road requires a systematic approach to ensure safety and adherence to regulations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves interpreting subtle cues and potential risks in real time, demanding a judgment call that balances immediate safety with efficient traffic flow, all within the specific legal framework of Taranaki, New Zealand. The driver's actions present a potential hazard that needs to be addressed without causing undue disruption or misinterpreting the situation. The best approach involves observing the driver's pattern of behavior over a short, reasonable period to ascertain if it constitutes a consistent disregard for road rules or a genuine safety concern. This allows for a more informed decision about whether intervention is necessary. This aligns with the principles of the Land Transport, Road User, Rule 2004 in New Zealand, which emphasizes safe driving practices and the prevention of dangerous situations. By observing for a pattern, an enforcement officer or concerned citizen is acting on evidence of potential risk rather than a single, possibly innocuous maneuver. This method respects the driver's right to operate their vehicle unless a clear breach of safety or law is demonstrated, and it avoids unnecessary escalation. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume the driver is intentionally driving dangerously based on a single observation. This could lead to an unwarranted stop or report, potentially causing distress to the driver and wasting enforcement resources. It fails to consider that a momentary lapse in concentration or an unfamiliar maneuver might not represent a pattern of dangerous driving, which is what regulations are primarily designed to address. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the behavior entirely, even if it appears unusual. While not every unusual maneuver is dangerous, a consistent pattern of erratic behavior could indicate a serious safety risk, and inaction in such cases could have severe consequences. This neglects the responsibility to ensure public safety on Taranaki's roads. Finally, an approach that involves confronting the driver directly without any prior observation or evidence of a rule breach is also professionally unsound. This could escalate a situation unnecessarily and is not supported by any regulatory framework that prioritizes evidence-based intervention. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Observation and assessment of the behavior. 2. Consideration of the context and potential for risk. 3. Application of relevant road rules and safety principles. 4. Intervention only when a clear breach of safety or law is evident or highly probable based on observed patterns. Question 17. Comparative studies suggest that the process optimization in driver testing can lead to more efficient licensing. In Taranaki, a provisional license applicant demonstrates a good understanding of road rules and maintains safe distances. However, during the test, they briefly hesitate at give way sign when no other traffic is present, and later, they slightly misjudge the positioning of their vehicle when parking, requiring a minor adjustment. Considering the Taranaki Land Transport Rule, Driving on Roads in the Land Transport, Driver Licensing, Regulations 2017, what is the most appropriate course of action for the testing officer? Option A. Continue the test without documenting the minor errors, planning to address them verbally at the end of the assessment. Option B. Overlook the parking maneuver entirely, assuming it was a minor slip that doesn't warrant attention for a provisional license. Option C. Immediately fail the applicant due to the hesitation at the give way sign, as this indicates a potential lack of decisiveness. Option D. Acknowledge the minor errors, note them for feedback, and continue with the assessment, focusing on the driver's overall safe operation and understanding of road rules. The correct answer is D. Acknowledge the minor errors, note them for feedback, and continue with the assessment, focusing on the driver's overall safe operation and understanding of road rules. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient traffic flow with the paramount importance of driver safety and adherence to the specific regulations of Taranaki. Misjudging the severity of a minor infraction or overreacting to a situation can lead to unnecessary delays, driver frustration, and potentially compromise the integrity of the testing process. The tester must exercise sound judgment, applying the Taranaki land transport rule, driving on roads and the associated land transport, driver licensing, Regulations 2017 with precision. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic and evidence-based approach to assessing driver performance. This means meticulously observing the driver's actions, comparing them against the established criteria within the Taranaki land transport rule, driving on roads, and documenting any deviations. If a driver demonstrates a clear understanding of road rules, exhibits safe driving habits, and only commits minor, non-hazardous errors that do not impede traffic flow or endanger others, the tester should proceed with the assessment, noting these minor points for feedback. This approach upholds the integrity of the licensing process by ensuring that only competent drivers are licensed, while also acknowledging that minor, correctable errors are part of the learning curve and do not necessarily indicate a failure to meet the standard for a provisional license. The focus remains on the driver's overall ability to operate a vehicle safely and legally on Taranaki roads. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately fail the driver for any minor infraction, regardless of its impact on safety or traffic flow. This fails to differentiate between critical errors that compromise safety and minor procedural mistakes that are common during testing. It also deviates from the spirit of the land transport, driver licensing, Regulations 2017, which aim to license competent drivers, not perfect ones. Another incorrect approach is to overlook a pattern of minor errors, even if they don't immediately cause a dangerous situation. While individual minor errors might be forgivable, a consistent pattern suggests a lack of ingrained safe driving habits or a misunderstanding of fundamental rules, which could pose a risk once the driver is licensed. This approach fails to adequately assess the driver's long-term safety potential. A third incorrect approach is to allow the driver to continue the test without any acknowledgement of observed minor errors, with the intention of discussing them later without specific documentation. This lacks transparency and accountability. The tester has a professional obligation to record all observed performance aspects, both positive and negative, to ensure a fair and defensible assessment according to Taranaki's licensing standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the Taranaki land transport rule, driving on roads and the land transport, driver licensing, Regulations 2017. 2. Observing the driver's performance objectively and systematically. 3. Categorizing observed actions as critical errors, minor errors, or correct performance. 4. Making a judgment based on the cumulative effect of these observations against the licensing criteria. 5. Documenting all observations accurately and transparently. 6. Providing constructive feedback that aligns with regulatory requirements. Question 18. The investigation demonstrates that a candidate for the Taranaki driver's test appears highly confident and proficient in most driving tasks, leading them to suggest skipping certain standard maneuvers they believe they have already mastered. What is the most appropriate and professionally responsible course of action for the examiner to take in Taranaki? Option A. Modify the Taranaki driver's test route to avoid areas where the candidate expresses concern about performing certain maneuvers, focusing instead on their perceived strengths. Option B. Conduct the Taranaki driver's test precisely as outlined in the official syllabus, ensuring all required maneuvers and assessments are completed. Option C. Allow the candidate to skip specific maneuvers they deem unnecessary, provided they demonstrate competence in the remaining sections of the Taranaki driver's test. Option D. Advise the candidate to practice the suggested maneuvers independently after the test, and then proceed with the test, omitting those specific elements. The correct answer is B. Conduct the Taranaki driver's test precisely as outlined in the official syllabus, ensuring all required maneuvers and assessments are completed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient traffic flow with the paramount importance of driver safety and adherence to the specific regulations of Taranaki. The driver's actions, while seemingly aimed at expediency, could compromise the integrity of the testing process and potentially lead to unsafe driving practices being overlooked. Careful judgment is required to ensure the testing remains a valid assessment of the driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely and legally within Taranaki. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves strictly adhering to the established Taranaki driver's test procedures. This means the examiner must conduct the test as outlined in the official Taranaki syllabus, regardless of the candidate's perceived proficiency or the prevailing traffic conditions. This approach is correct because it ensures the test is a standardized and objective assessment of the driver's competency against the specific requirements set by Taranaki authorities. It upholds the integrity of the licensing process, guaranteeing that all licensed drivers have met the same minimum safety and legal standards mandated for operating vehicles in Taranaki. This aligns with the ethical obligation of examiners to prioritize public safety by only licensing drivers who have demonstrated the required skills and knowledge. Incorrect approaches analysis. Allowing the candidate to skip a section of the Taranaki driver's test based on their self-assessment or the examiner's informal observation is professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to comply with the Taranaki driver's test syllabus, which is designed to evaluate a comprehensive range of driving skills. By deviating from the prescribed curriculum, the examiner compromises the validity of the test, potentially licensing a driver who has not demonstrated proficiency in critical areas. This poses a direct risk to public safety on Taranaki roads, suggesting the candidate practice a specific maneuver outside the formal test environment, even if it's a common one, is also professionally unsound. The Taranaki driver's test is designed to assess performance under test conditions, which may include specific traffic scenarios or examiner instructions. Circumventing these conditions undermines the purpose of the test. Furthermore, it could be perceived as providing an unfair advantage or coaching, which is unethical and against the principles of a fair and impartial assessment. Modifying the test route to avoid areas the candidate expresses difficulty with, even if those areas are part of the standard Taranaki test routes, is another failure. The test routes are established to assess a driver's ability to navigate various road conditions and traffic situations common in Taranaki. Avoiding challenging sections means the driver is not being tested on their ability to handle all foreseeable circumstances, thus failing to meet the safety standards required for a Taranaki driver's license. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety above all else. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing the specific requirements of the Taranaki driver's test syllabus. 2. Maintaining strict impartiality and objectivity throughout the assessment process. 3. Recognizing that the test is a standardized evaluation, not a personalized coaching session. 4. Prioritizing the integrity of the licensing process to ensure only competent and safe drivers are licensed. 5. Consulting official guidelines or supervisors if any ambiguity arises regarding test procedures or candidate performance. Question 19. Assessment of a driver licensing applicant in Taranaki reveals a minor hesitation at controlled intersection where no immediate hazard is present. The applicant subsequently proceeds safely and competently, considering the regulatory framework governing driver licensing in New Zealand, which approach best reflects the professional responsibilities of the testing officer. Option A. Immediately fail the applicant for any hesitation, regardless of context or safety impact. Option B. Rely on the applicant's assurance that the hesitation was insignificant without independent observation. Option C. Overlook the hesitation to expedite the testing process and clear the backlog of applicants. Option D. Document the hesitation and assess its impact on overall safe driving competency according to NZTA standards before making a decision. The correct answer is D. Document the hesitation and assess its impact on overall safe driving competency according to NZTA standards before making a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient traffic flow with the paramount importance of ensuring driver competency and public safety on Taranaki's roads. The pressure to clear the testing backlog might tempt an examiner to overlook minor procedural deviations, but this would compromise the integrity of the licensing process and potentially put other road users at risk. Strict adherence to the New Zealand Land Transport Rule, setting of speed limits 2003, and the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999 is essential. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting all observations, including any minor hesitations or deviations from standard procedure, and then objectively assessing their impact on the applicant's overall ability to drive safely and competently according to the New Zealand Transport Agency (NZTA) driver licensing standards. This approach ensures that the assessment is fair, thorough, and defensible, upholding the integrity of the licensing process and prioritizing public safety. It aligns with the ethical obligation of an examiner to act in the public interest and adhere to regulatory requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves overlooking minor hesitations or procedural deviations to expedite the testing process. This is ethically unacceptable as it compromises the thoroughness of the assessment, potentially licensing drivers who may not be fully competent and thus endangering public safety. It violates the spirit and letter of the Land Transport Driver Licensing Rule 1999, which mandates a comprehensive evaluation of driving skills. Another incorrect approach is to immediately fail the applicant for any minor hesitation, regardless of its context or impact on overall safety. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and an overly rigid interpretation of the rules, failing to consider the nuances of driving performance. While safety is paramount, the assessment should be holistic, evaluating whether the hesitation posed any actual risk or indicated a fundamental lack of skill. This approach may not align with the NZTA guidance on assessing driver competency, which often emphasizes the context and consequence of errors. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's self-assessment of their performance without independent, objective observation and documentation. This abdicates the examiner's responsibility to conduct a professional evaluation and introduces subjectivity that can lead to inconsistent and unfair outcomes, failing to meet the regulatory requirement for an objective assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and public safety. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the relevant legislation, e.g., Land Transport Rule, Setting of Speed Limits 2003, Land Transport Driver Licensing, Rule 1999. 2. Objectively observing and documenting all aspects of the applicant's performance. 3. Critically analyzing the observed behaviors within the context of safe driving practices and regulatory standards. 4. Making a decision based on the totality of the evidence, ensuring fairness to the applicant and safety for the public. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a potential underestimation of fuel efficiency for a fleet of delivery vehicles operating in Taranaki, New Zealand. To address this, the fleet manager needs to calculate the fuel consumption in liters per 100 kilometers for each vehicle during the audit period. Given that vehicle A traveled 250 km and consumed 150 liters of fuel, and vehicle B traveled 980 km and consumed 130 liters of fuel, what is the difference in fuel consumption per 100 km between vehicle A and vehicle B? Option A. Vehicle B consumes 2.76 L/100 km more fuel than vehicle A. Option B. The average fuel consumption for both vehicles is 12.5 L/100 km. Option C. Vehicle B consumes 1.56 L/100 km more fuel than vehicle A. Option D. Vehicle A consumes 1.20 L/100 km more fuel than vehicle B. The correct answer is A. Vehicle B consumes 2.76 L/100 km more fuel than vehicle A. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in the fuel efficiency calculations for a fleet of delivery vehicles operating in Taranaki, New Zealand. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not only accurate mathematical application, but also adherence to specific New Zealand road transport regulations and potentially company policies regarding fleet management and environmental reporting. The auditor's concern suggests a need for rigorous validation of the data and methodology used. The correct approach involves recalculating the fuel consumption per 100 kilometers for each vehicle using the precise formula, and then comparing this to the manufacturer's stated fuel efficiency ratings, adjusted for typical operating conditions in Taranaki. This method ensures that the calculations are based on established industry standards and directly address the auditor's concern about efficiency. Specifically, the formula for fuel consumption per 100 km is \\text fuel consumption L/100 km equals \left \frac \text fuel used L \text distance traveled km \right times 100 \. This approach is correct because it directly measures the efficiency in a standardized unit, liters per 100 kilometers, which is universally understood and comparable. It also allows for direct comparison with manufacturer specifications, providing a clear benchmark for performance. Adherence to this calculation method aligns with best practices in fleet management and any relevant New Zealand environmental reporting guidelines that may require such data. An incorrect approach would be to simply average the fuel used across the entire fleet without accounting for individual vehicle performance or distance traveled. This fails to identify specific vehicles that may be underperforming or experiencing mechanical issues, and it does not provide a meaningful measure of efficiency per vehicle. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the odometer readings without verifying the accuracy of the fuel dispensed, potentially leading to inflated or deflated efficiency figures. A third incorrect approach would be to use a simplified estimation based on historical data without recalculating based on the audit period's actual fuel usage and distances, which would not address the specific findings of the audit. These methods lack the precision required for accurate fleet performance analysis and regulatory compliance. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, understand the specific concern raised by the audit. Second, identify the relevant regulatory framework and company policies. Third, select the most appropriate and accurate calculation methodology. Fourth, perform the calculations meticulously, ensuring data integrity. Finally, document the process and findings clearly for review and reporting.